Commander June stood at the viewing port of the combat center. His face showed no emotion, but his hands gripped the rail too tight. The Vex ships moved like a swarm of angry insects. They surrounded Harmony Station, their black hulls making them look like holes in space. Only their red lights gave away their presence. "Status report," Jun said, his voice steady. Lieutenant Da looked up from her screen. Her uniform was wrinkled, and dark circles framed her eyes. No one on the command staff had slept in 3 days. "Sir, we've lost 3 more defense platforms. Shields on the east quadrant are at 12%. She paused, then added, "Casualty reports are severe." June nodded once. "Numbers, Lieutenant. 78% across all species. The Nari medical ships are overrun. The Toll fighters have no more pilots." She looked down at her screen again. "And we lost contact with the moon colony an hour ago." Around them, the Alliance Command Center buzzed with desperate activity. 17 different alien species worked side by side, each bringing their special skills to the fight. A year ago, this would have been a proud display of galactic unity. Now it was just the last stand of a dying alliance. An explosion rocked the station. The lights flickered, then returned. "They've breached the outer hull in sectors 7 through 9, reported Officer Han, his fingers flying over his control panel. "Security teams are responding." But June didn't need him to finish. The Vex were unlike any enemy the Alliance had faced. Once they got inside a station, it was over. They could interface with any technology, turning it against its makers. They learned from every encounter, adapting to new weapons in hours. "Begin evacuation procedures," June ordered. "Priority to civilians and essential personnel. Military forces will cover the retreat." Day looked up sharply. "Sir, the Council hasn't authorized." "The Council isn't here," June cut her off. "And they won't be anywhere if we don't preserve what forces we have left." He turned to the communications officer. "Any word from Earth?" Officer Kim shook her head. "Still nothing clear, sir. The last transmission was broken. Something about a response force, but that was 3 days ago." June wasn't surprised. Earth was far from the front lines, and humanity was one of the newest members of the Alliance. Their technology was considered primitive, their military small compared to the older races. The Alliance Council had placed human colonies low on the defense priority list, assuming they would be of little interest to the Vex. Another explosion, bigger this time. The lights went out completely before emergency power kicked in. "Breach on the command level," Han reported, his voice tight. "They're in the station core." "Time to go," Jun said. "Send the evacuation order. All personnel to escape pods and ships. Download what combat data we can and wipe the rest." As his team rushed to obey, Jun took one last look at the tactical display. The Vex ships had completely encircled Harmony Station now. The Alliance fleet that had once protected this sector was reduced to a scattering of retreat signals, fleeing in all directions. Harmony Station had been the pride of the Alliance, a forward base that secured 17 populated systems. With its fall, the entire Orion arm would be open to the Vex advance. "Commander," Da called from the doorway. "We need to move now." June turned to follow when Officer Kim suddenly called out. "Sir, I'm getting a clear transmission from Earth space." June paused. "Put it through." The message was short, the signal surprisingly strong and clear despite the chaos around them. "To all Alliance forces, this is Colonel Rivers, United States Marine Corps, 1st Extraterrestrial Expeditionary Unit. We are inbound to your position. Hold fast. Reinforcements are coming." Da looked at June, confusion on her face. "Marines, what can they possibly do that the Alliance fleet couldn't?" June didn't answer as they hurried toward the escape pods. He didn't know what humans called Marines could do against an enemy that had defeated the combined might of 17 advanced civilizations. But soon, they would all find out. 3 weeks after Harmony Station fell, Admiral Ta stood on the bridge of the Alliance flagship Guardian. The remains of his fleet drifted in space around Rigel Prime, the last major outpost before the core systems. His ships were damaged. His crews were tired. Hope was in short supply. "Admiral, the evacuation is at 80%, reported Captain Min. "But we need at least 2 more days to get all civilians off-world." Ta nodded, his face grim. "The Vex will be here in 10 hours. We don't have 2 days." The Alliance had tried everything against the Vex. Energy shields, plasma cannons, quantum disruption fields. Nothing worked for long. The Vex always adapted. "Sir," called out a sensor officer, multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. Tai felt his heart sink. "The Vex are early." "No, sir," the officer said, confusion in her voice. "These signatures are different. They're not Vex." The main screen showed a dozen ships appearing in flashes of light. They were unlike any Alliance vessels. Blocky, functional, almost primitive-looking compared to the sleek Alliance ships. "They're broadcasting Alliance identification codes," said Captain Min. "But I've never seen ships like these." Captain Hannah from the diplomatic corps stepped forward. "Admiral, they're human vessels, but not the usual Earth trade or diplomatic ships." "Open a channel," ordered Ta. Hannah tried for several minutes but shook her head. "They're receiving but not responding." The bridge crew watched as the human ships formed a defensive line between the Alliance fleet and the expected arrival point of the Vex. "They're launching a small craft," Min reported, "heading toward us." Ta made a quick decision. "Prepare to receive them in Docking Bay 3. Captain Hannah, you're with me. Min, you have the bridge." When the human shuttle landed, Tai was surprised to see soldiers in full combat gear exit the craft. They wore heavy armor with no bright colors, just shades of green, brown, and black. Each carried weapons that looked simple but solid. A tall human with a weathered face stepped forward. Unlike the others, he wore no helmet, revealing short-cut gray hair. "Admiral Ta. Colonel Rivers, United States Marine Corps." Ta bowed slightly. "Colonel, we received word that human forces were coming, but frankly, we didn't expect much." Rivers didn't seem offended. "We came as soon as we could. Had to gather our forces." He looked around the docking bay. "I understand you're planning an evacuation." Captain Hannah spoke up. "The Vex will reach this system in less than 10 hours. We've lost too many ships to make a stand." "So you're running." Rivers said this as a fact, not a question. Tai felt a flash of anger. "We've lost 38 battles against the Vex. They adapt to every weapon, every tactic. We fight, they learn, we die." Rivers nodded. "I studied the reports. Mind if I see your command center?" On the bridge, Rivers and his team reviewed the tactical displays. The Marines asked direct questions that sometimes felt too simple to the Alliance officers. How do these Vex communicate with each other? What happens if you isolate a small group of them? Have you ever tried non-technological weapons? A young Marine officer was looking at casualty reports. Your troops fight from a distance, with energy weapons. Of course, said Min. It's the most advanced method of warfare. Rivers and his officer exchanged a look that Tai couldn't read. Admiral, Rivers finally said, I have 12 ships with a total of 3,000 Marines. That's not much compared to your forces, but we fight differently than you do. Than the Vex expect. How can 3,000 soldiers make a difference when millions have failed? Hannah asked. Rivers smiled for the first time. It wasn't a happy smile. Numbers don't win battles. Marines do. He pointed to the display showing the incoming Vex fleet. We're not evacuating. We're going to hold this system. Tai started to object, but Rivers continued. The Vex adapt to your technology because they understand it. They've never faced humans who are trained to win when everything goes wrong. He looked Ta directly in the eyes. Give us a chance to show you how Marines fight. Against his better judgment, Ta felt something he hadn't felt in months. Lieutenant Sun had never seen soldiers like these humans before. The Alliance High Command had assigned her as liaison to the Marines, and for 3 days she had watched them with growing confusion. While Alliance soldiers trained with neural simulators and AI combat systems, the Marines spent hours in physical exercise. They ran in heavy gear. They practiced hand-to-hand fighting. They set up their weapons, took them apart, and put them back together with their eyes closed. "They're so primitive," Sun said to Admiral Ta during her daily report. "Perhaps," Tai replied. "But we've tried advanced. Advanced is failing. Let's see what primitive can do." Sun returned to the section of the station where the Marines had set up. Colonel Rivers had turned a cargo bay into what he called a staging area. Marines were checking equipment and loading weapons with solid metal projectiles. "Lieutenant Sun," Rivers greeted her. "Just in time. We've detected Vex scouts near the research facility on the moon. We're going to greet them." Sun was alarmed. "Standard protocol is to evacuate when scouts appear. They're gathering data to adapt to our defenses." Rivers smiled. "Exactly. So we're going to give them some bad data." 2 hours later, Sun found herself in a Marine transport ship heading toward the research facility. With her was a squad of 12 Marines led by Sergeant Lee. Unlike the Alliance combat suits with built-in communication and targeting systems, the Marines wore armor that looked like it relied more on physical protection than technology. "Aren't you afraid your systems will fail?" Sun asked Lee. "Our systems are designed to fail," Lee answered, checking his weapon. "When they do, we keep fighting anyway." Sun was shocked. "That makes no sense. The whole point of military technology is reliability." "Technology always fails," said a female Marine named Park. "Marines don't." Before Sun could respond, the transport shook. They had landed. "Vex scouts detected in the East Wing," the pilot announced. 12 signatures. In an Alliance force, this would trigger an automated response. Defensive positions would be calculated by AI. Energy shields would be deployed. Drones would be sent first. Instead, Sergeant Lee simply nodded to his team. "Standard sweep and clear. Fire teams Alpha and Bravo. Execute." The Marines moved with surprising speed and coordination. Without neural links, they used hand signals and short verbal commands. They worked in pairs, always covering each other. Sun followed at a safe distance, her scanner tracking both Marines and Vex. The two groups were on a collision course. The first contact was sudden and violent. The Vex scouts were tall, metallic beings with multiple limbs. They normally moved with precise, calculated efficiency, but the Marines didn't engage as expected. Instead of setting up a defensive position with clear lines of fire, the Marines scattered. They used the facility's furniture, walls, and doorways as cover. They moved constantly. They flanked the Vex from multiple angles. Most surprising to Sun was when a Vex adapted to the Marines' weapons, generating a shield that stopped their projectiles. Instead of retreating to find new weapons, a Marine named Kim simply charged forward. He slammed into the Vex with his armored shoulder, knocking it to the ground, then used a knife to attack its connection points. Another Marine tossed what looked like a small metal container. It exploded, not with energy, but with small metal pieces that tore through the Vex's outer shell. "They're using physical force," Sun realized with shock. The Vex were adapted to energy weapons, shields, and technological attacks. They weren't prepared for simple, brutal physics. In less than 10 minutes, all 12 Vex scouts were destroyed. Not a single Marine was seriously injured. Sergeant Lee approached Sun, his helmet now removed. He was sweating but looked energized rather than tired. "First lesson," he said. "Vex expect you to fight smart. Marines fight hard." Sun looked at the destroyed Vex units. For the first time in months, she felt something like hope. "I need to report this to Admiral Tai," she said. Lee nodded. "Tell him we're just getting started." The Alliance Military Council sat in stunned silence. On the large screen before them, they watched recordings of the Marines in combat against the Vex. Major Jin, head of Alliance Intelligence, narrated the footage. "This is from 3 days ago, when the Vex attacked our fuel depot," Jin said. The screen showed Marines moving through smoke and fire. Unlike Alliance soldiers who moved in orderly formations, the Marines seemed chaotic. They rolled behind cover. They threw small explosives. They shouted to each other. Most shocking was how close they got to the enemy. Alliance soldiers fought from a distance. These humans fought face to face with the Vex. "They lost 7 Marines in this battle," Jin continued. "But they killed over 100 Vex and saved the depot." Admiral Ta looked around the table. Comments. General Ho of the Nari Defense Force spoke first. "Their methods are disturbing. They seem to have no regard for their own safety. And yet they win," said Ta. Lieutenant Sun, who had been with the Marines for 2 weeks now, stepped forward. "The Marines don't fight like we do, because they don't think like we do. They call it aggressive adaptation." The council murmured. This was exactly what made the Vex so dangerous. Their ability to adapt. "Bring in Colonel Rivers," Tate ordered. Rivers entered the council chamber still wearing his combat uniform. It was stained and worn, showing he had been in the field with his troops. "Colonel," Ta began, "your Marines have had some success against the Vex, but your casualty rate is higher than Alliance standard protocols allow." Rivers looked around the table. "With respect, Admiral, your standard protocols have led to the loss of how many systems?" 17. The room grew tense. Rivers continued. "You wanted to know how Marines fight. I'm here to tell you." He walked to the screen and brought up a map of the current battle zone. "The Vex fight like a single mind, because they are one. Every unit shares information. Every encounter makes them stronger." Rivers pointed to key points on the map. "But the Marines fight like humans, as individuals who work together. We don't need neural links or AI support to coordinate." "But that's inefficient," said General Ho. "It's unpredictable," Rivers corrected. "The Vex can't calculate what they don't understand." Rivers brought up new images on the screen. Marines fighting in different ways. Some with weapons, some with their hands, some setting traps or ambushes. Marines train for chaos. We have a saying, "No plan survives contact with the enemy." When things go wrong, and they always go wrong, we adapt. Each Marine can make decisions on their own. Sun added, "They call it command initiative. Even their lowest-ranking soldiers can change plans if needed." Many council members looked uncomfortable with this idea. In most Alliance forces, orders flowed from the top down. Individual soldiers followed precise instructions. "You fight like barbarians," said one council member. Rivers didn't seem offended. "The history of warfare on Earth is the history of adaptation. Romans, Mongols, Germans, Americans. The winners weren't always the ones with the best technology. They were the ones who adapted fastest." He looked each council member in the eye. "The Vex think they're the best at adaptation. They're wrong. Humans have been adapting to survive for thousands of years. It's what we do best." Admiral Ta stood up. "Colonel Rivers, what do you propose?" Rivers smiled. "The Vex see the Alliance as a machine. Predictable, logical. I propose we show them the human way of war. Unpredictable, aggressive, and absolutely relentless." "And the cost?" asked General Ho. Rivers' smile faded. "There's always a cost in war. The Marines aren't here to die for your Alliance. We're here to make the enemy die for theirs." A heavy silence fell over the room. Then Admiral Ta nodded. "Prepare your plan, Colonel. The Alliance will follow your lead." Operation Achilles begins in 5 hours. Colonel Rivers announced to the combined forces, "Study your roles. Know your objectives." Commander June looked at the battle plan again. It was unlike any Alliance operation he had ever seen. The plan was simple. Hit the Vex where they were weakest, their local command nodes. Alliance scouts had discovered these nodes were vital for coordinating Vex forces in each system. The target was a command nexus in the TAS-CD system. The system had fallen to the Vex just 1 month ago. "Commander June," a word, Rivers called. June followed Rivers to a quiet corner of the planning room. "You'll be leading the Alliance forces alongside Captain Lee and his Marines," Rivers said. "Your troops ready?" June nodded. "They've been training with your Marines for 2 weeks. It's different from our usual methods." Rivers smiled slightly. "Different is good. The Vex won't expect different." 6 hours later, June found himself on a stealth transport heading toward the TAS-CD command nexus. With him were 20 Alliance soldiers and 15 Marines led by Captain Lee. Everyone was checking weapons and equipment. "Remember," Lee told the mixed squad, "when we hit the ground, expect your tech to fail. The Vex will try to shut down your systems." The Alliance soldiers looked nervous. They relied heavily on their advanced suits and weapons. "If your gear fails," Lee continued, "stick with a Marine. We do this old school." June noticed how calm the Marine seemed. While his Alliance troops had nervous energy, the Marines had a steady focus. They weren't excited or afraid. They were ready. The transport shook as it entered TAS-CD's atmosphere. 2 minutes to drop, the pilot announced. Captain Lee stood up. "Time to earn your pay, people." "Commander June, your squad ready?" June nodded, trying to match Lee's confidence. "Ready." The moment they landed, things went wrong. "Vex countermeasures detected," reported an Alliance soldier. "Our systems error." His voice cut off as the Alliance communication network went down. The soldiers' advanced targeting systems flickered and died. Their heads-up displays went blank. Panic began to spread among the Alliance troops. Without their technology, they felt blind and helpless. But the Marines didn't miss a beat. "Hand signals from here on," Captain Lee ordered, demonstrating with his hands. Teams of 4. Marines take point. Alliance troops in support positions. June watched in amazement as the Marines switched smoothly to non-electronic communication. They used hand gestures, finger taps, and simple verbal codes to coordinate their movements. "Follow their lead," June ordered his troops. The mixed force moved through the Vex facility. Unlike the sleek Alliance outposts, the Vex had transformed the human colony into something alien. The walls pulsed with strange energy. The floors seemed alive. When they encountered the first Vex patrol, Lee signaled for everyone to freeze. The Vex moved past without noticing them. "They're looking for energy signatures," Lee whispered to June. "No power, no detection." This was the opposite of Alliance tactics, which relied on energy shields and active defenses. The Marines were using the Vex's technological advantage against them. The deeper they went, the more resistance they met. When fighting broke out, it was brutal and close. The Marines taught the Alliance soldiers to use simple weapons when their advanced ones failed. Like this, a Marine named Park showed an Alliance soldier. "Aim for the joints. Hit them hard and fast." 3 hours into the mission, they reached the central chamber. The Vex command nexus pulsed with alien energy. "Plant the device," ordered Lee. 2 Marines moved forward with a small, simple-looking box. June recognized it as an EMP device, designed to release a powerful electromagnetic pulse. "This will fry their systems," Lee explained. "Cut off the head, the body falls." As the Marines set the device, alarms sounded. Vex guards swarmed into the chamber from all sides. "Defensive positions," June shouted. The battle was chaotic and violent. Alliance soldiers fell. Marines were wounded, but they held their ground around the EMP device. 30 seconds to detonation, called a Marine. Captain Lee looked at June. "We need to hold this position." June nodded. "We will." The EMP detonated with a deep thump. All lights in the facility went out. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, in the darkness, they heard the Vex making strange sounds. When emergency lights came on, they saw the Vex moving erratically, bumping into walls, unable to coordinate. For the first time in the war, the Vex looked confused. Captain Lee turned to Jun with a grim smile. Now we know their weakness. The success of Operation Achilles changed everything. For the first time in the war, the Alliance had hope. Admiral Ta stood in the new Joint Command Center. Maps and screens showed battle plans across 3 star systems. Marines and Alliance officers worked side by side. Report, Tide ordered. Major Jin stepped forward. Operation Achilles was a complete success. The Vex and Ta City are still disorganized. We've retaken 2 major outposts with minimal casualties. Ta nodded with satisfaction. And our new weapons. Ready for deployment, Jin replied. The Marines helped us design them. On a nearby table lay the new weapons. They looked simpler than Alliance energy rifles. Heavier, more solid. Kinetic weapons, explained Lieutenant Sun, who had become the chief liaison between Marines and Alliance forces. The Vex can adapt to energy weapons, but they struggle against physical force. Ta picked up one of the rifles. It felt strange in his hands. Alliance weapons were light and sleek. This felt primitive, but he had learned that primitive could be effective. Have all Alliance troops begin training with these weapons, he ordered, and implement the Marine training program fleet-wide. In the training hall, Marines taught Alliance soldiers their methods. Lieutenant Sun watched as Sergeant Park instructed a group of Alliance troops. The Vex expect you to fall apart when your tech fails, Park told them. We're going to teach you how to fight when everything goes wrong. The training was hard. Alliance soldiers were used to letting their suits and weapons do the work. Now they had to learn to fight with their bodies and minds. Again, Park ordered after an Alliance soldier failed to complete a hand-to-hand combat move. The Vex won't give you a second chance. Sun approached Colonel Rivers, who was observing the training. Your methods are working, she said. The joint squads are showing a 70% increase in combat effectiveness. Rivers nodded. It's not just about the fighting. It's about the thinking. He gestured to the training groups. Each of these soldiers needs to learn to make decisions without waiting for orders. That's difficult for many Alliance species, Sun admitted. Our military structures are very hierarchical. Hierarchy has its place, Rivers said. But when things go bad, every Marine is expected to step up and lead. That's what we need to teach your people. 2 weeks later, the Alliance launched its first major counteroffensive. The target, the Proxima system, an important Alliance world that had fallen early in the war. Admiral Ta watched from the command ship as the operation unfolded. The plan used what Colonel Rivers called the leapfrog tactic. Small teams of Marines would strike at Vex command nodes, creating confusion that larger Alliance forces could exploit. First wave has penetrated Vex defenses, reported an officer. EMP devices activated in sectors 4, 7, and 9. On the tactical display, Vex forces in those sectors began to move erratically. The coordinated Vex defense was breaking down into isolated groups. Second wave moving in, announced Major Jin. Alliance heavy forces engaging. Ta watched as the Alliance ships moved into position. They were using new tactics, staying close together in small, flexible groups rather than the standard formation. The Vex are adapting to our EMP weapons, Jin warned. Effectiveness dropping in Sector 7. This was the moment that usually spelled doom for Alliance operations. The Vex would adapt, and the Alliance would be forced to retreat. But not this time. Implement Phase 3, ordered Ta. The Alliance forces switched tactics immediately. As the Vex adapted to counter the EMP weapons, the Alliance troops closed to short range. They used the new kinetic weapons and Marine-style close combat. The Vex, expecting the Alliance to retreat and regroup as they always had before, were caught unprepared. Vex forces breaking in all sectors, Jin reported, surprise in his voice. Alliance troops advancing. For the first time since the war began, the Alliance was pushing the Vex back, reclaiming territory rather than abandoning it. Admiral Ta looked at Colonel Rivers, who stood quietly watching the battle unfold. It's working, Ta said simply. Rivers nodded. This is just the beginning. The Vex learned fast. So must we. But for now, after months of defeat, the Alliance had won its first major victory. The tide of war had begun to turn. Lieutenant Da had never seen anything like New Haven. Once a thriving Alliance colony, the planet was now barely recognizable. The Vex had changed it, covering cities with strange metal structures. The air itself felt wrong. Stay alert, warned Staff Sergeant Park as their transport landed. This is going to be house-to-house fighting. Day nodded, checking her weapon. After 3 months working with the Marines, she had learned to trust their instincts. She commanded an Alliance squad attached to Park's Marine platoon. Their mission: retake New Haven's capital city and rescue any survivors. Remember your training, Day told her squad. When tech fails, use your hands. When plans fail, use your head. The Marines had taught them well. The battle began the moment they left their transport. Vex defenders opened fire from hidden positions. 3 Alliance soldiers fell immediately. Cover, shouted Park, diving behind a broken wall. The mixed force scattered, taking shelter behind ruins. This was typical Vex strategy. Hit hard at the landing zone, hoping to panic the attackers. Before the Marines, it might have worked. Now, the Alliance troops responded like veterans. Jackson, Ward, flanking positions. Dai ordered 2 of her soldiers. Without hesitation, they moved to the sides, seeking better angles to fire from. The Marines advanced in pairs, one providing covering fire while the other moved forward. Dai's squad copied their movements. Slowly, they pushed into the city. The fighting grew more intense as they approached the central district. The Vex seemed to know they were coming. They've adapted to our approach pattern, Park said during a brief pause in the fighting. We need to change tactics. A young Marine named Garcia spoke up. Sergeant, the sewers. We could use the old maintenance tunnels to bypass their defenses. Park nodded. Good thinking. Day, take half our force through the tunnels. We'll keep their attention up here. Day felt a moment of doubt. In the old Alliance military, a lieutenant wouldn't take orders from a sergeant. But the Marines didn't care about rank as much as good ideas. We'll meet you at the central plaza, she agreed. The tunnels were dark and dangerous, but they worked. Day's group emerged behind the Vex lines and attacked from the rear. Caught between 2 forces, the Vex began to fall back. Day's squad fought their way to the central plaza, where they were supposed to meet Park's team. But when they arrived, they found only a handful of Marines taking cover behind a ruined statue. Where's Sergeant Park? Dai asked a wounded Marine. Holding the north entrance, the Marine replied, wincing as he applied a bandage to his leg. Vex brought in heavy units. Cut us off. Day made a quick decision. We need to help them. Song, Kim with me. The rest of you secure this area. They fought their way north, through streets filled with debris and dead Vex. When they found Park's position, Dai was shocked. Only 4 Marines remained, surrounded by Vex bodies. Park was bleeding from a wound in his side, but still firing his weapon. Thought you might be dead, Park said when he saw Dai. Takes more than Vex to kill Alliance soldiers now, she replied, helping her squad set up defensive positions. For 6 hours, they held that street corner. Twice the Vex nearly overran them. Each time, the Marines and Alliance troops fought back with desperate courage. When reinforcements finally arrived, only Park and 2 other Marines from his original team were still alive. Later, as medics treated the wounded, Day found Park sitting alone, looking at a small hologram projector. Your family? She asked, sitting beside him. Park nodded, showing her the image of a woman and 2 children. My wife and kids. Back on Earth. Day was surprised. Marines seemed so focused on fighting that she sometimes forgot they had lives beyond war. You all fight so hard, she said, like you don't care if you live or die. Park closed the hologram. That's where you're wrong. We fight like this not because we want to die, but because we have something worth living for. He looked at the battlefield around them. We just understand that sometimes ensuring they live means we don't. Day thought about the Marines who had died that day. Each one had fought until the end, never giving up. She had finally understood what made the Marines different. It wasn't just their training or tactics. It was their spirit. 6 months after the Marines arrived, the war had changed completely. The Alliance had pushed the Vex back from 7 major systems. For the first time, they were winning. The Vex are retreating in an organized way, he told the Alliance War Council. This isn't defeat, it's strategy. Admiral Ta nodded. Our intelligence agrees. The Vex are withdrawing to protect something. Major Jin stepped forward. The once formal intelligence officer now moved with the confident stance of someone who had seen combat. The Marines had changed everyone. We've analyzed Vex retreat patterns, Jin said, activating a star map. All Vex forces are moving toward this region at the edge of the galaxy. What's there? Asked General Ho. We believe it's their central consciousness, Jin explained. A planet-sized superorganism that controls all Vex. Exactly, said Admiral Ta. And I propose we cut it off. He outlined his plan. A massive assault with a full Alliance fleet. Overwhelming force to destroy the Vex once and for all. The Council nodded in agreement, but Rivers shook his head. That won't work, he said firmly. The room fell silent. Despite all they had learned, many Alliance leaders still found it hard to hear criticism from a human. Explain, Ta said simply. Rivers walked to the map. The Vex are drawing us into a trap. They're consolidating their forces around their home world. If we bring our fleet there, they'll be ready. They'll have adapted to everything we've used so far. What do you suggest? Asked Ta. Rivers smiled. Something they won't expect. A small strike force. Marines and Alliance special forces. We go in quiet while the fleet creates a diversion. A handful of soldiers against an entire planet. General Ho sounded shocked. Not just any soldiers, Rivers said. The best we have. One small team can reach the central neural cluster while the Vex are focused on the fleet. The Council debated for hours. Finally, Admiral Tai made his decision. We'll do both. The fleet will attack as planned. And Colonel Rivers will lead the strike team. Commander Jun volunteered immediately when he heard about the mission. Are you sure? Rivers asked him. This is likely a one-way trip. Jun nodded. The Vex destroyed my home colony. I want to see this through. The strike team was small, 12 Marines and 8 Alliance special forces. They trained together for 2 intensive weeks, preparing for every possible scenario. The night before the mission, Lieutenant Sun found Jun in the observation deck, looking at the stars. You should rest, she told him. I will, he said. Just wanted to see the stars one more time. Sun stood beside him. Colonel Rivers says our chances are about 30%. Jun smiled slightly. Better odds than we had 6 months ago. The mission began with the Alliance fleet launching a massive attack on the Vex world. Hundreds of ships, thousands of fighters, all to create a diversion. Meanwhile, a single stealth ship approached from the dark side of the planet. Inside, Rivers briefed the strike team one last time. We have one shot at this, he said. The Vex central consciousness is deep underground. We'll have to fight our way down level by level. He looked at each member of the team. If any of you want to back out, now's the time. No one moved. Good. Rivers nodded. Marines, Alliance. Today we fight as one. For all our worlds. The landing was smooth, but that was the last easy part. From the moment they left the ship, they faced wave after wave of Vex defenders. The strike team fought brilliantly, using every tactic they had learned. Marines and Alliance soldiers moved like one unit, protecting each other, advancing steadily toward their target. But the cost was high. 3 Marines fell in the first hour, 2 Alliance soldiers in the second. By the time they reached the entrance to the central chamber, only 7 remained. Rivers, Jun, 3 Marines, and 2 Alliance soldiers. Final obstacle, Rivers said, looking at the massive door blocking their path. Charges set. A Marine named Chung nodded, placing explosives around the doorframe. Just then, June's scanner beeped. Sir, massive Vex force approaching from behind. 2 minutes until they reach us. Rivers looked at June. Someone needs to hold them off. Give the rest enough time to reach the core. June understood immediately. He checked his weapon. I'll do it. June, Rivers began. No arguments, Colonel, Jones said firmly. You need to finish this. I'll buy you time. Before Rivers could respond, alarm sirens blared. The Vex were getting closer. Go, Jun said. End this war. As the charges detonated and the door to the central chamber opened, Jun took up position in the corridor. His last sight was Rivers leading the remaining team through the smoke. Then Jun turned to face the approaching Vex, alone but unafraid. The sound of Jun's last stand faded behind them as Colonel Rivers led the remaining team into the central chamber. What they saw made them stop in wonder. The chamber was enormous, lit by a soft blue glow. In the center floated a massive structure that pulsed with light and energy. This was the Vex central consciousness, the mind that controlled their entire species. Set the charges, Rivers ordered. The plan was simple. Place explosive devices around the chamber and destroy the central consciousness. As a Marine named Quan moved forward with the explosives, something unexpected happened. The air in front of them shimmered, and strange symbols appeared, floating in the air. It's trying to communicate, said Captain Hana, the sole surviving Alliance officer besides Rivers. She had joined the mission at the last minute because of her background in xenobiology. More symbols appeared, shifting and changing. Hannah studied them carefully. I think I can understand some of this, she said. It's similar to early Vex communication patterns we studied. Rivers kept his weapon ready. What's it saying? Hannah's eyes moved rapidly, following the symbols. It's afraid. It says it attacked because it was afraid. Afraid of what? Asked Rivers. Of us. Of all intelligent life. Hannah looked shocked as she translated more symbols. It says its predictive models showed that the Alliance would eventually threaten its existence, so it attacked first. Rivers frowned. And humans. Earth? We weren't even part of the Alliance when this started. New symbols appeared. Hannah translated. It says humans were an unknown variable. Our unpredictability confused its models. Marine Sergeant Garcia laughed bitterly. You killed millions because your computer models got confused. More symbols flashed. Hannah continued. It says it's a survivor, the last of its kind from another galaxy. It came here and found young species developing. It predicted they would become a threat. Rivers considered this information. Their mission was to destroy the Vex consciousness, end the war permanently. But now they faced a choice. Can we trust it? Asked Quan. Maybe this is a trick. We can't know for sure, Rivers admitted. He looked at the charges they had brought. Enough to destroy this chamber and everything in it. But making the wrong choice here means either more war or the end of a unique life form. Outside the chamber, they heard explosions. June had fallen, and Vex forces were approaching. Rivers made his decision. Hana, keep talking to it. See if we can negotiate. Everyone else, defensive positions. We hold this room until we have an answer. 3 days later, Admiral Ta stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the Vex ships retreat from Alliance space. The ceasefire had held. The war that had nearly destroyed the Alliance was ending not with a final battle, but with words. I still can't believe it, said Lieutenant Sun, standing beside him. Peace with the Vex. We have Rivers and his team to thank, Tai replied. Especially Hana. Her ability to communicate with the Vex consciousness saved countless lives. Sun nodded. And Commander June. Without his sacrifice, they would never have reached the central chamber. His name will be remembered, Ta promised. 1 week later, Colonel Rivers stood at attention as the Alliance held a ceremony honoring the fallen. The list of names was long: Alliance soldiers and Marines who had given their lives in the war. When Commander June's name was read, Rivers saluted. Beside him, the surviving Marines did the same. After the ceremony, Admiral Tai approached Rivers. "The Alliance Council has approved your proposal," Ta told him. "Lieutenant Sun will establish the first Alliance Marine Corps, trained in your traditions." Rivers nodded with satisfaction. "They'll learn quickly. They've already shown they have what it takes." "And you?" Tai asked. "Will you stay to help train them?" Rivers looked at the stars visible through the station's windows. "For a while. But soon my Marines and I need to head home. Earth will be wondering where we've been." Ta smiled. "When you go, know this: the Alliance will never forget what humanity taught us. Victory isn't about technology or numbers. It's about the spirit of those who fight, and what they fight for." As Rivers watched the Alliance officers mingling with his Marines, he knew that humanity had left its mark on the galaxy, not through conquest or superior technology, but through courage, adaptability, and the willingness to make hard choices. "No one left behind," Rivers said quietly. "Not in body, not in memory, not in honor." The Marine Corps promise. And now, the promise of the Alliance as well.